The night felt darker than usual in Westerville, Ohio. Rain pounded violently against the windows of the police clinic, as if the sky itself was protesting what was about to happen. Under the harsh, unforgiving fluorescent lights, Sergeant Lowell Ellison walked in with slow, heavy steps, burdened by a decision that was tearing him apart. Lying motionless on the cold metal examination table was Duke, his K-9 partner, his most loyal friend, a veteran German shepherd who had fought beside him through countless dangers. But now, with lifeless eyes and labored breathing, Duke looked like a prisoner awaiting execution. Beside the table stood Officer Tom Granger, arms crossed, face unreadable. He had known Lowell for over 15 years. He knew what Duke meant to him, especially after the death of Lowell's wife, Sybil, in a car crash that nearly destroyed him. Back then, it was Duke who pulled him back from the edge. And now, Lowell was being asked to give him up, to allow the state to put him down. The order had come down fast and hard. Duke had attacked a civilian during a routine operation. Unprovoked. Dangerous. "You know the protocol, Lowell," Tom said, voice firm. "It's out of our hands now." Lowell didn't respond. His hand trembled as he gently stroked Duke's head. The dog's fur was still damp with blood. Not the civilian's, but his own, from being restrained. The only sounds in the room were the steady beeping of a heart monitor and the faint rattle of a syringe being prepared in the background. But none of it made sense to Lowell. Duke wasn't impulsive. He never attacked without cause. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong, and no one seemed to be questioning it. As the veterinarian stepped forward with the needle, Lowell, almost instinctively, reached into the inner pocket of his uniform. He pulled out a small voice recorder, one he used regularly during field operations. He hadn't even realized it was still on him. With a shaky thumb, he pressed play. And in the silence that followed, a chilling voice echoed through the room, the voice of the very civilian Duke had attacked. "The second he drops that leash, I'll shoot the damn mutt. Nobody'll see a thing. Then I'll just say it was self-defense." Tom's eyes widened. The vet froze mid-step. Lowell stared at Duke, whose gaze was now steady and alert, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. That attack hadn't been a mistake. It had been protection, instinct, loyalty. But what Lowell didn't know yet was that the man Duke attacked had a hidden connection to Sybil's past, a past buried more than 20 years ago. And somehow, Duke had uncovered it first. The story is just getting started, and what comes next will leave you speechless. So make sure you don't miss a single second. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. We're so close to 100,000 subscribers, and you'll be able to say you were here before everything exploded. Lowell couldn't sleep that night. He sat alone on the bench outside the clinic, Duke wrapped in a thermal blanket beside him, sedated but alive. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the cold air stung against his face. His mind raced, replaying the recording again and again. Why would a civilian, someone supposedly innocent, speak like that? And why would Duke go straight for him without hesitation? That wasn't coincidence. That was intent. It was protection. But from what? Early the next morning, Lowell returned to the precinct and requested the case file on the civilian involved in the incident. His name? Elias Rourke. The name didn't ring a bell at first, but something about it unsettled him. A quick background check revealed Elias had no priors, no outstanding warrants, no official reason to be flagged. Clean. Too clean. That only made Lowell more suspicious. He printed out the report, stared at the photo on the page, and then, suddenly, something shifted in his gut. He'd seen that face before. Not recently, but years ago, in an old photograph that Sybil kept hidden in the back of a drawer. Lowell drove home in silence, his hands gripping the wheel harder than necessary. When he reached the house, he went straight to the attic, a place he hadn't set foot in since Sybil's funeral. Dust coated the boxes like layers of forgotten grief. He opened a large wooden trunk filled with her old belongings. Journals, letters, photos. After several minutes of digging, he found it. A faded Polaroid of Sybil in her early 20s, standing beside a tall man with piercing eyes. Elias Rourke. He was younger in the photo, but the jawline and eyes were unmistakable. And Sybil. She was smiling in a way Lowell hadn't seen in years. Not since before the marriage. His hands shook as he turned the photo over. In her handwriting, Elias, summer of '98. No one can ever know. The words hit him like a punch to the chest. Who was this man really? What had Sybil kept from him all those years? Why was Duke the only one who seemed to sense something was wrong? Lowell sat down on the attic floor, the photo trembling in his fingers. His heart ached with betrayal, but more than that, confusion. Duke had attacked Elias because he sensed a threat. But it wasn't just to Lowell's life. It was to his past, his identity, everything he thought he knew about his wife. And something told him, Elias hadn't come back into his life by accident. And Duke had known it all along. The attic felt colder now, even with the sun rising beyond the dust-covered windowpane. Lowell sat frozen, staring at the photo in his lap like it might somehow speak to him, explain everything. The handwriting on the back haunted him. No one can ever know. He whispered it aloud, the words tasting like ash on his tongue. Sybil had always been guarded about her early years, brushing off questions with vague smiles and half-truths. But Lowell never pressed. He thought love didn't require knowing every detail. Now, that trust felt like a cracked foundation beneath his feet. Back at the precinct, things were already unraveling. Internal Affairs had launched an inquiry into the civilian attack. Duke was under strict medical observation, but whispers were spreading about the old dog losing control, about Lowell going soft. Officer Granger had been silent since the recording came to light. He avoided eye contact with Lowell in the hallways. The department's discomfort wasn't just with Duke. It was with the idea that something bigger, something rotten, had slipped through their system unnoticed. Lowell knew he couldn't talk to anyone there. Not yet. Not until he understood what Elias Rourke really wanted, and why he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. He decided to retrace steps, beginning with Sybil's hometown in southern Ohio. She never liked going back, and now he wondered if Elias had something to do with that. Before leaving, he stopped by the clinic to see Duke. The dog was awake, alert, though visibly weak. When Lowell entered the room, Duke's ears perked up. There was no wag, no bark, just a deep, quiet stare that pierced right through him. "I need your help again, buddy," Lowell whispered, crouching down to place a hand on Duke's shoulder. "You knew. I don't know how, but you knew." The dog blinked slowly, then laid his head gently against Lowell's chest, like a soldier offering comfort to a commander who no longer knew who the enemy was. That night, Lowell pulled out Sybil's journals, ones he hadn't been able to open since she died. Most entries were benign, mundane even, but toward the back, the handwriting grew messier, more frantic. One passage stood out. "I should have told Lowell the truth. I thought burying it would keep us safe. But Elias doesn't forget. He never forgets." Lowell closed the journal, heart racing. Elias wasn't just a ghost from Sybil's past. He was a threat she had feared until the day she died. And now, Lowell wasn't just protecting Duke. He was unraveling a secret that someone might be willing to kill for. The road to Sybil's hometown was long and empty, lined with dying trees and faded memories. Lowell hadn't been back since the funeral, and even then, he'd avoided the main streets. The town of Asheville hadn't changed much. Same rusted gas stations, same peeling signs, same silence heavy with things no one wanted to talk about. He parked outside the old library, the only place Sybil used to mention fondly, a sanctuary during her teenage years. If there were any records of Elias Rourke or clues to his past, that's where they'd be. Inside, the scent of musty paper and floor polish greeted him like a ghost from another life. The librarian, an older woman with tired eyes and a voice like sandpaper, didn't recognize him until he mentioned Sybil's name. Her face softened. She was a sweet girl, quiet, always reading, stayed out of trouble, except when she was with him. Lowell's heart skipped. "You mean Elias?" The woman hesitated, then nodded. People thought he'd leave town or wind up in prison. He was off, had a hold on her. No one could understand why. Digging through newspaper archives, Lowell found what he was afraid of. A small article from August 1998. Local teen injured in hunting accident. Investigation closed. Elias Rourke was listed as the only witness. The injured teen was someone else entirely, but Lowell could read between the lines. It wasn't a hunting accident, it was a cover-up. And Sybil? She had been with them that day. Her name wasn't in the article, but her journal had mentioned August of '98. Something terrible happened out there, and she'd spent the rest of her life trying to keep it buried. As he left the library, a black SUV idled across the street. Tinted windows, no plates, pulled away the moment Lowell stepped onto the sidewalk. He felt it in his bones. Someone was watching. Someone knew he was digging. He got into his car, locked the doors, and drove straight to the one person he never thought he'd speak to again. Sybil's sister, Marlene. They hadn't spoken in years. The falling out had been bitter, but if anyone else knew the truth, it would be her. Marlene lived in a farmhouse on the outskirts of town, surrounded by silence and mistrust. She opened the door slowly, her expression guarded. "Lowell," her voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" He held up the photo of Sybil and Elias. "I think your sister was hiding something that's trying to surface, and I think someone doesn't want me to find it." She didn't answer right away, but the way her hand trembled on the doorknob told him everything. She knew. Marlene didn't speak for several seconds. Her eyes stayed locked on the photo, like it was some cursed object that had finally resurfaced. "Come in," she whispered, stepping aside. The house smelled of wood smoke and old fabric, the kind of scent that made time feel slower. Lowell sat at the kitchen table, heart pounding as Marlene poured them both coffee with shaking hands. The silence stretched thick between them until she finally exhaled. "I hoped I'd never see that man's face again." Lowell leaned in, voice low. "Elias Rourke. Who is he, really?" Marlene's expression darkened. He wasn't just some old boyfriend. He was dangerous, possessive, violent in ways no one wanted to believe. Sybil was drawn to him when she was too young to know better. He controlled her, isolated her. And the day of that so-called hunting accident, something happened out in those woods. Something she never got over. She mentioned it in her journals, Lowell said, but never directly. Marlene nodded. Because she was protecting someone, maybe even you. I begged her to go to the police, but she was terrified. Said Elias had a way of making people disappear, and he always came back. Always. Her voice broke slightly. I think he followed her for years, even after she married you. But she never told you, did she? Lowell looked away, jaw clenched. No. She said the past didn't matter, that we had a fresh start. The words felt hollow now. He thought he'd given her peace. In truth, she'd been living with a shadow all along. And Duke? Somehow Duke had sensed it. Maybe Sybil had confided in the dog more than she had in him. Maybe that's why Duke had reacted so violently. Not just to a stranger, but to a threat Sybil had feared with her entire soul. Suddenly, Marlene stood and went to a cabinet. She returned with an old metal box and placed it gently in front of Lowell. She made me promise I'd never open this unless something ever happened to her. I kept it all these years. But now you deserve to know. Inside the box were old letters, a faded birth certificate, and a restraining order. Elias Rourke had filed to have it expunged years ago, but Sybil had kept a copy. Tucked behind it, a photo of Sybil as a teenager holding a baby Lowell had never known about. His hands began to tremble. She had a child? Marlene nodded, tears welling. Before she met you, Elias was the father. She gave the baby up to protect it, and she never stopped watching over him. Lowell felt his entire world tilt. He didn't just lose Sybil years ago. He never truly knew who she was. And now, someone out there had every reason to keep those secrets buried permanently. What do you think is hidden in Sybil's past that even Lowell couldn't imagine? Drop your theories in the comments, and if you caught the clue about Duke, let us know. This story is far from over. Lowell sat in his car for nearly an hour after leaving Marlene's house, the metal box still on the passenger seat, his mind spinning. A child. Sybil had a child with Elias. That fact alone shattered everything he thought he knew about his marriage. But deeper than the betrayal was a rising terror. If Elias had returned after all these years, it wasn't by chance. He was looking for something, or someone, and now Lowell feared he might know exactly who that was. He drove back to Westerville in silence, every mile feeling heavier. At home, he reopened the box and reread the letters. Most were addressed to My Little Star, a nickname Sybil never used with Lowell. Her writing was raw, maternal, desperate. She wrote about fearing Elias, about watching from a distance as her son was raised by another family through a closed adoption. And one letter stood out, dated just 3 weeks before her death. In it, she wrote, "He's close. I don't know how, but I can feel Elias circling again. If anything happens to me, I pray Duke will do what I can't." Lowell closed his eyes. Duke, that's why the dog reacted the way he did. He'd been trained to protect Sybil and her son at all costs. And somehow, Duke recognized Elias at that crime scene. Elias wasn't just blending into society, he was hunting. And the boy, now a grown man, could be in danger. But there was one question still tearing at Lowell. Who was he? He needed help, and there was only one person left he could trust. He called Tom Granger, and this time he didn't hold anything back. He explained the photo, the letters, the restraining order. First, Tom was silent. Then he asked, "Why are you telling me this now?" Lowell hesitated. "Because I think Elias Rourke is trying to erase everything Sybil left behind. And if I don't stop him, someone else might end up dead." That evening, as Lowell returned to the clinic to check on Duke, he noticed something chilling. The door to the K9 unit had been forced open. Inside, the room was dark, empty, and Duke was gone. No staff, no explanations, just the faint scent of cigarette smoke hanging in the air, the same brand Elias used back in the photo from 1998. Lowell's heart dropped. This wasn't a coincidence. Elias was sending a message. He had taken Duke, the last piece of Sybil's protection, and whatever he planned next would be personal. Lowell stood frozen in the doorway of the K9 unit, the room stripped of everything familiar. Duke's leash was still hanging on its hook, untouched, but his kennel was open, and there were scratches on the floor, fresh ones. Signs of a struggle. His partner hadn't walked out willingly. The clinic staff claimed they hadn't seen anything unusual, but their nervous glances told a different story. Someone had been there, someone they were too afraid to confront or report. Lowell knew exactly who that someone was. He rushed to the precinct's security room, demanding access to the exterior surveillance tapes. The tech on duty hesitated but gave in under Lowell's stare. Fast-forwarding through hours of footage, Lowell finally saw it. 2:14 a.m. A tall man in a dark coat, face partially obscured by a ball cap, led Duke out of the side entrance. The dog resisted, even tried to pull back. But the man moved fast, precise, like someone trained. Elias Rourke. He had planned every second of it. Lowell's rage built like fire in his chest. But beneath it, fear clawed deeper. Elias wasn't hiding anymore, he was taunting him. This was no longer about silence or revenge. This was about control. About finishing something he had started decades ago. And now, with Duke gone, Lowell was stripped of his most trusted ally. But he wasn't helpless. Not yet. He still had Sybil's letters. Her clues. Her warnings. She had left him a trail. He just hadn't been desperate enough to follow it. Until now. One line from her final letter echoed in his mind. If he returns, he'll go back to the place where everything began. The river cabin. That's where he lost control. Lowell remembered it vaguely. A small hunting cabin Sybil's father had once owned, deep in the woods along the Stillwater River. It had burned down years ago, but the land remained. And if Elias was reliving old ghosts, that's where he'd drag Duke. That's where he'd want to finish the story. Lowell didn't wait. He packed his service weapon, flashlight, and a bag of Duke's favorite treats. Not out of sentiment, but in case he needed to lure him out of danger. As he pulled out of the driveway, he noticed something on his windshield. A single, folded piece of paper. No envelope. Just 5 words, written in block letters. Bring the letters. Come alone. Lowell's hands tightened around the steering wheel. The game was no longer about finding Duke. It was about surviving Elias. And Sybil's past. Their past was about to erupt into the present. The forest surrounding the old river cabin felt like it hadn't seen daylight in years. Trees twisted over narrow dirt paths, and the wind carried the scent of damp earth and dead leaves. Lowell parked a mile away, just as Sybil's letter had warned. If he knows you're close, he'll disappear again. With Duke's leash clipped to his belt and the envelope of letters secured inside his jacket, he moved through the brush, each step sinking deeper into memory and dread. The night was silent, unnaturally so, and every sound, from a snapping twig to a distant owl, made his heart pound harder. The remains of the cabin came into view just past a bend in the river. Most of it had burned to the ground, but the stone foundation and part of a back wall still stood. Moonlight spilled through the broken trees, casting eerie shadows. And then he saw movement. A dark figure crouched near a collapsed beam. Lowell raised his flashlight slowly and whispered, "Duke." A low, familiar whine answered him. It was Duke, tied by a short chain, his body tense, his eyes locked on something behind Lowell. Lowell turned, and Elias stepped into view. He looked older but not weaker. His eyes, still sharp, gleamed with something unhinged. He held a pistol loosely in his right hand, as if it were part of him. "Took you long enough," he muttered. "I was starting to think you didn't care about what she left behind." Lowell kept his hands visible, his voice calm. "I came alone, just like you asked." Elias smiled faintly. "Good. That means you're ready to listen." "You've already made her suffer enough," Lowell said. "Why drag Duke into this?" Elias chuckled, bitter and low. "Because that mutt knew, just like she did. And you never even asked. She spent her whole life hiding from the truth. But the truth doesn't rot, Lowell. It waits." Lowell took a step closer. "What do you want?" Elias raised his pistol, not aiming it yet. "I want the letters. Every last one of them. She wrote things she shouldn't have. She remembered too much." Lowell hesitated. He could feel the weight of the envelope inside his jacket. But he also saw the flicker of movement in Duke's eyes. Waiting, calculating, alert. In that second, a gust of wind knocked ash loose from the burned rubble, clouding the space between them. Elias flinched, just enough. Lowell lunged forward, not toward Elias, but toward Duke, snapping the chain loose in one motion. A shot rang out, and then darkness. The shot echoed through the forest like thunder, scattering birds into the night sky. Lowell hit the ground hard, his ears ringing, unsure if the pain in his chest was from the fall or a bullet. Duke scrambled beside him, snarling, eyes fixed on Elias. But Lowell was still breathing. The shot had missed barely. His fingers tightened around a rock, instinct guiding him more than thought. As Elias stepped forward to fire again, Lowell hurled the rock with every ounce of strength he had. It hit Elias square in the side of the head. The man staggered, cursing, and the gun dropped. In a blink, Duke surged forward, teeth bared, launching himself between Lowell and the threat. The two figures clashed, man and dog, a blur of fury, memory, and vengeance. Elias screamed as Duke bit down hard on his forearm, forcing him to the ground. Lowell rushed to his feet, grabbing the gun. He aimed it straight at Elias's chest, his breath ragged, eyes burning. But Elias didn't plead. He just smiled through bloodied teeth. "You don't want justice," he said. "You want closure, and you're not going to get it. Not from me." His words were ice. Lowell's finger hovered on the trigger, but Duke stepped back and looked up at him. Not as a weapon, but as a guide. Lowell's pulse slowed. He understood. Killing Elias wouldn't heal anything. It wouldn't bring Sybil back, and it wouldn't protect the boy she gave away. Lowell kicked the gun far into the trees. Then he pulled out his phone and called it in. The authorities would handle Elias now, properly. No more shadows. No more secrets. Elias lay groaning on the ground, subdued, cuffed with Lowell's own spare restraints. As sirens wailed in the distance, Duke collapsed at Lowell's feet, exhausted, but safe. Lowell knelt beside him and whispered, "You did it, buddy. You kept your promise to her." Later, at the hospital, Lowell sat with Duke resting at his side. A detective from another district briefed him on Elias's background. Over the years, he had changed identities multiple times, evaded arrest through legal loopholes, and built a network of false records. But what stood out most was this: he had recently been seen near Canton, Ohio, working under a different name, volunteering at a youth center. One of the boys there, about 25 years old, matched the age Sybil's son would be now. Lowell felt a weight shift in his chest, a silent certainty. He had found the man responsible for Sybil's torment. But there was one more person left to find, someone who didn't even know the truth of who he really was. And Duke would be the one to lead him there. 2 weeks later, Lowell stood outside the modest brick building of a youth center in Canton, Ohio. The early winter air was sharp, the sky heavy with gray clouds. Duke sat beside him, a healing scar still visible above his right paw, but his posture proud, alert. This wasn't just another visit, this was the final step. In his coat pocket, Lowell carried the last of Sybil's letters. It wasn't meant for him. It was addressed only with a name he had never spoken aloud before that day: Daniel Rourke. Inside the center, children and young adults moved through the halls, laughing and calling out to one another. Lowell scanned the room until his eyes landed on a young man stacking chairs at the far end. Tall, strong build, same sharp jawline as Elias, but his eyes, they were Sybil's. Kind, thoughtful, and quietly observant. He had no idea who was standing just feet away from him. Duke, however, did. The dog's ears perked, then lowered slightly. He moved forward, not aggressive, not commanding, but drawn, as if pulled by memory. Daniel turned as Duke approached. "Hey there, buddy," he said softly, kneeling down. Duke nudged his head under Daniel's hand, then sat still, tail thumping slowly. A connection passed between them that needed no explanation. Lowell watched in silence, heart pounding. It was like seeing Sybil come back to life in the most unexpected way. He finally stepped forward. "Daniel." The young man looked up. "Yeah." Lowell swallowed hard. "My name is Lowell Ellison. I was married to your mother." Daniel's face shifted, unsure. "There must be some mistake. My mom. She passed when I was a baby." Lowell nodded, voice tight. "She didn't want to leave you. She gave you up to protect you. And she spent the rest of her life making sure you were safe." He handed Daniel the envelope. "These are her words. She wanted you to have them when the time was right." Daniel took the letter with both hands, staring down at it like it might dissolve. Tears welled up in his eyes before he even opened it. She wrote to me?" Lowell nodded. "She never stopped loving you. She just never stopped running from him." They sat on the steps outside the center as the sun began to break through the clouds. Daniel read the letter in silence, Duke lying between them. No words were needed. Healing doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it comes with presence, truth, and time. And as Lowell looked at the young man beside him, and the dog who never stopped protecting what mattered most, he knew Sybil's legacy hadn't been lost. It had been passed on through love, through pain, and through the unbreakable bond that only those who've endured everything can truly understand. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming emotional stories. With every video, a new truth is revealed, and some of them change everything forever.